Hello. Today in my writing process playlist, I'm going to talk about the third draft and paper editing. So in this video, I'm going to give a little example of what I do with the paper edit. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. So here is my document. I'm going to show you what I've been doing. Here are some of my pages. I'm going to flip through it quite quickly, so you're not really going to get any spoilers, but I've been working away diligently, a little faster than I thought I would at this point, but I've been pretty inspired. I think this is definitely my favorite part of the process, just shaping this into something. And as you can see, I've just been really plugging away at it. What I'm going to show you is chapter 12, the arrival at Hieron. Hieron is the kind of compound where a lot of the story takes place. There isn't really going to be much as far as spoilers here. I'm not going to really talk too much about what I've actually written. It's more about what I'm doing to the text. So I really like these ultra fine red pens, 0.5, because there's not a lot of space on the page in terms of in the line spacing. You know, if you're writing an essay, you can double space it, right? In this case, I set it up a little differently, so I write it on the margins typically, but I just start going through and making changes as I read. Sometimes you change one thing and it's kind of a cascading effect where you have to change many things in the sentence once you altered the one thing, because a sentence is kind of like a house. If you pull out, you know, one of the pieces of foundation, then the whole thing kind of has to be rebuilt. So a lot of this isn't just changing words, it's going through it and trying to figure out what I need to do for the next draft. Much of what I'm writing down is actually notes for myself to remind myself once I go back into it. I'm not actually writing that much in this draft. It's more just processing it. But when I circle the words, that means I want to go back with my synonym finder or thesaurus or, you know, one of the other tools that I use for the synonyms. Sometimes I'll get back to it later, but in the case of this page, I'm going to do it all to show you. Oftentimes I'm out at a coffee shop. I can't bring the heavy synonym finder with me. It's just too heavy. So I'll often come back home and do the other parts. Some things that I'm looking for are words that I can cut, parts that are clunky or need work, other parts that maybe I need to expand. I think it's important to be ruthless here. You may have spent like a half hour trying to formulate some sentence or paragraph in the first and second draft that you just cut here. This is more about chiseling away at it, because like I've said in previous videos, I just don't think it sings yet. This is usually the time when that happens. You start molding it into something. So I have my key on here with my highlighters, and I'm going to be doing some of that too. Sometimes I will edit the entire page first and then I'll go back in with the highlighters. Sometimes I'll just do it as I'm going. Kind of depends on what I'm focused on, but if it really jumps out at me the first time, I will just do it so I don't forget. But then when I look at it, because I don't just read it one time, I go through it several times, I will notice more things, and that's when I start highlighting it more. Orange means I need to increase the emotion or the impact or the suspense, just bump it up a little bit. The beauty of writing is the drafting process. You can do 100 drafts if you want to. And what's great about it is, unlike some other arts or sports or things where you have to perform, you're not like stuck in the moment. You can keep going over it and making it better and better and better. You know, even making a film, you only have the performances, and if you don't get all the performances right off the bat, you're kind of screwed when you actually go to edit. In this case, each pass that you do, you end up finding new things. You're just getting more into the minutia and just strengthening it as much as you can. The first one is often the obvious one. You want it to be something that sings unique in some way. When you're writing the first draft or second draft, you have to throw the obvious one in there just so you can get an idea what you're trying to say. Once you get in the third, fourth, fifth draft, then you can really take time and choose the words that work best as far as painting a picture. And you're trying to take the adjective and the noun and combining them in a way to make one vision. Even if I'm cutting things from this draft, I will probably be cutting more in that draft, because every time you go over it, you find new things. Now, in this paragraph, I have several colors. Colors, I think, are very specific and they're easy to do poorly. You can make them too flowery where it just sounds ridiculous, or you can make them too plain. There's definitely a sweet spot, I think, and I'm going to jump back to that in a second. Okay, so I took my synonym finder and I started going through and finding better words, and I'm throwing those in there. Sometimes this can take an incredibly long time. There have been times where it's taken me like a half hour to find a single word, and the funny thing is I might end up changing it later. It's a really important thing, I think. It wasn't important in the first two drafts, and maybe I'll even get tighter in it as I go. Sometimes finding that perfect word can completely change the sentence. It can be a catalyst for the whole sentence to change. So it is kind of important to do some of that stuff before you get too far along. I think the third or fourth draft is probably the best time for that, because you don't know what's going to happen. It could change everything. Some people don't realize that when you're writing and you change a single word, it obviously affects the sentence, but it can also affect the entire paragraph. Any little change like that can just throw it off, or make it better in some cases, but can easily throw it off. I would say it's quite important to try to do this in the middle, leaning into the end of the drafting process and getting it pretty stable before you go into your final edits, your proofreading and stuff. I think the earlier you do it, not in the first and second draft, because those are more about speed, but once you slow down, I think it's really important to get it done. Sometimes when you have a list, let's say 3 items, and they each have an adjective, and you're trying to change those out, that can be even harder because each adjective that you change can unbalance the other ones. And you're like, oh no, like now this one is quite strong, but the other 2 are weak. And you have to find it where all 3 of them are kind of balanced. And that can take a long time. In fact, in this section here, I probably cut out 20 minutes of me looking and mulling it over. Sometimes you go into your thesaurus and you find a word and it seems right, but it just seems too obvious. And then you gotta be like, well, what other word is similar to it that can maybe throw me into another direction, that can give me a spark of inspiration. When you find this other word, then you look up the synonyms for that word, and then maybe you find the word that you want. Because like I said, you just don't want it to be obvious. It's definitely a difficult process. Don't be afraid to change your mind too. I mean, that's the whole point of this draft, is to keep changing things. That's one reason why I print it, because I want to be able to write things down and then scribble them out and write new things and be able to see what I wrote before. It's just useful that way. In this situation with the colors, I want these to feel more autumn or fall, because I'm trying to make this be this kind of folk horror vibe a little bit. My initial pass, I was using just colors that came to my head, the first ones, but now I'm trying to make it a little bit more interesting as far as colors that are not obviously fall, but could be. And I'm using one look to find the colors. I will put what my searches were on the screen here. Now, I've completed the page as far as my red notes pretty much. But now I'm going to read over it again and start looking for other things that need to be fixed. Most of this has to do with highlighters. Yellow means clunky. I think the first sentence of your book is very, very important, but I also think the first sentence of your chapters and your last sentence is also quite important. And I usually rewrite them many, many times until I get them right. I'm not saying that your whole book isn't important, but I think focusing on those is wise. Orange means to kind of increase the emotion, or the dread or the terror or anything. I'm trying to get the reader to feel something. I'll often put a note next to it just to remind myself what I'm trying to do here. Sometimes I will highlight in between 2 lines, meaning that I want to add another line or more description or something there. And if I'm going for a whole paragraph, I might just note it on the side. But I feel like this is the time to get it done, because in the 4th and the 5th and the drafts after that, you're really just focusing more on the poetics kind of and how it reads. You really need to fix the problems in this one. I mean, I guess some of the problems can wait to the 4th. And I've had some problems even go on till, you know, right to the very, very, very end of my deadline of when I needed to get it out or get it to the publisher or whatever. And that's what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the cycle. One thing to note is that while I'm doing this, I'm also going through the document and inserting any of the last notes, any strays, any random vocabulary that I've saved, or any other pertinent information that has somehow slipped through my fingers up to this point. I'm really trying to get this to a state where the 4th draft is going to be more about refining and buffing it up, making it pretty, let's say. So I'm going to be doing this up through September. If I finish early, I'm going to be going over it again and again to try to get all these notes in there and just have it ready for my 4th draft. And I'll give an update in a few weeks about where I'm at with that. But that's all I got for this one. If you have anything to say about this part of the process, you can comment below. But until next time, take care. Have a good day.